Okay, so I will attempt to go ahead and make a video just to show how to finish up both the watercolor and the marker projects for a finished project on board. So just to talk a little bit about um, these boards. Um, let's see. This is an actual wet media board purchased from Hobby Lobby, about $4. This is the Crescent brand. I did a video just showing what the boards look like and where they were at Hobby Lobby that is posted on Folio. Um, there's also just the mounting board. So if you're gonna decide to go ahead and draw directly on paper, you can then mount your finished illustrations and your flats onto the mounting board. So this is the about the Melton brand mounting board, $11 for 3 pieces. And these all of these boards are 15 by 20. So this has two different sides, one black, one white. The black side is the side I should be mounting on. I kind of like the gray because sometimes the black and the white change the appearance of the colors that you use in your collection, but that's up to you. They do have multicolor boards in there also. Um, so first thing you want to do, I would suggest is start with, if you're going to mount your mood board. So again, this is an 11 by 17 page. I did a demonstration on how to mount the swatches, which are here. So I have two that are cut with the tape to prevent fraying. I have one that's mounted on the back to show that kind of style if you want this to look a little neater. And then this is my mood board. I would then go in and use glue stick or rubber cement, make sure it's nice and even. So we need to measure around the border. Okay, so I'm gonna mount my mood board on the black page. And I want to make sure I can usually eye it and make sure that my page is in the center of the board. But you do want to make sure it's not crooked when you commit to actually mounting it. So as a principle of design, usually we have what's called a weighted bottom. So that means you have a little bit more space on the border at the bottom than on the top. So I'm going to just take a quick measurement. So this is at about 1 3/4. This side is at about 1 5/8. So I know that I have a little bit more on this side here. That's 1 1/2. That's 1 1/2. So that's perfect. So then I'm going to measure and just put something heavy on top of this. I'm going to measure at the top. So that's exactly 2 inches at the top and a little less than 2 inches at the bottom. So I'm going to slide this up just a tiny bit. So it's 1 3/4 inches. I got 2 inches at the bottom. Okay, and I want to make sure this is even. So I'm using my clear ruler. This is even. So I'm going to go in with my pencil. Just lightly mark my corner placement. I can erase that later or rub it off with the cement pickup. So this is just where I'm going to put my paper down. So for gluing purposes, if you want to draw a, like kind of trace the shape of your board, so you can try not to use too much glue, that's also fine. Okay, so I am using the rubber cement. And again, remember that this is a contact glue. So you need to, just for the sake of this video not being too long, I'm gonna just kind of glue my corners here and not the whole page. You should be gluing the entire thing so that you don't have any air bubbles in here. And I'm gonna glue my entire rectangle on my artboard, my mounting board. Try to use this glue in a well-ventilated space. Okay, so I'm just gonna be a little skimpy on the glue here, just for the sake of time. Because I know I did do this demonstration before. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of glue my corners here. And again, this is a contact glue, so we need to make sure both surfaces are completely dry. So when it's dry, it's no longer wet, it's tacky to the touch. So that's when you know it's ready to cement the two surfaces. Okay. So I'm gonna wait for that to dry. Another option is a spray mount. I'm just gonna, just to make sure this sticks carefully, go in with the spray mount also. And that pretty much dries right away. This is also a contact glue. But it does get all over everything. So you close your hands, so just be careful when you're handling it. Okay, and my rubber cement looks like it's dry. And I'm gonna place my page right back on those corners. And you can either take a clean piece of paper. I wouldn't suggest a paper towel or anything with fibers, and just kind of rub it down. And make sure you get all your corners just nice and flat. Just make sure your hands are clean so you don't have any fingerprints on your work or smudges. That looks pretty good. Nice and flat surface around the edges. That's a good mount. And I'm actually rubber cement pickup. And then clean up the edges on my board. You can also just do this with your finger, but you can kind of see the extra glue there. And I'm just gonna go in and clean up the surface of my board so it's not sticky. And you just always want a nice professional looking presentation. So good execution. And my little fabric swatch is lifting up because I've been carrying this back and forth for demos. So I'm gonna go back and glue that down later. So just anything that you need to touch up, you can touch up. The rubber cement pickup is also erasing my pencil lines for the most part. But I can also go in and erase that either with the gum eraser or the kneaded eraser. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So there's one board down. Okay, and that's the mood board. So now's the time that you may need to make some decisions. So for my board too, this is gonna have my illustrations on it. This is actually a wet media board, a watercolor board. So I can just put my figures directly on the page. Um, the thing about that is you really have to commit to it. So you need to make sure they're lined up, everything's edged up. And I would suggest doing the rubbing method for transferring your figures to the page, to make sure that you don't see pencil impressions on the actual board. But you can also cut down your watercolor paper or Bristol, um, or even your mixed media paper to 11 by 17 or anything in between that 15 by 20, to mount on the board just like we did the mood board. Okay, so it would be a page on here just like the mood board. So that's up to you. Just to show you how to go directly to the board, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer my figures to this board and illustrate on this board. So with the watercolor boards, it's actually really difficult to see through them. So the light table tracing method may not work. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and just trace over my figure, and I'm using a 6B pencil. And I'm gonna just press really hard here. And this is after you've traced over your figures a couple times and you've perfected them and you know which designs you want to use, before you commit to the page. And this does take a little longer, because you may end up having to trace it more than once, but okay, so there's my figure. And what I'm gonna do is, if I was okay with the reverse, I could just put it here and just trace it off. I don't actually want the reverse. So I'm gonna draw on the opposite side, just trace it one more time. And the graphite will come off on the other side. And again, this is my tracing paper. And you can actually even things out because when you flip it over, you can see what's symmetrical and what's not. And you can kind of correct your drawing. because what you're tracing the second time is actually what's going to transfer to the paper. So you can make any corrections here. Okay, so see that it picked up the transfer there just from me tracing. And I want to set up, because one of the biggest beginner mistakes is people have figures that start slanting. So with my light pencil, I think I want my figures kind of in the middle. I really want to make sure I plan out my page. If I were going to have 5 figures, I'd have one there, one here, one here, one here. That would fill up this page. If I wanted to try to fit my figures with my flats in here, I'd probably want to draw a slightly smaller scale. I may want to put these really close together, maybe even slightly overlapping, and then I could plan to put maybe my flats here, and they could be really small. I could put my flats in the middle, or I'm sorry, my figures in the middle, and then flats for each outfit on the sides. So you really want to plan the page. So I think for this one, I'm gonna just put my figures over here on this side. I want to use a little bit more of my board space. I think I'm gonna come up maybe 1.5 inches. Let's do 2 inches from the bottom, and I'm gonna draw myself a guideline. And I don't want my figures or my flats to run up against the page. So maybe I'll give myself maybe a 1-inch guideline. All of this will erase unless you actually want to box your figures in for layout purposes, for aesthetics. But the guidelines will all get erased later. Okay, so I'm gonna sit her here and have her bump right up against this edge here. Make sure she doesn't look tilted. And if you want to tape the paper down, you can. And I'm going to go in and let's use a Sharpie. I usually like to use a spoon. Let's see. And I'm going to go in and just kind of start trying to transfer. There's a little metal cup when I learned this trick in school that you can use, but I do not have one of those. It's like a little paint tin. And it will smudge a little bit, so just be mindful of your fingers so that you don't put smudges on your clean board. I just want to check, and you can see it here. I'm just gonna see the back of my spoon, just rub a little bit more to make sure it's dark enough for me to see. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now, if I did multiple figures here, which I'll do and just go ahead and lay out, and then show you how to do either just a lineup of figures you could do, or figures with flats if you want to forego the expense of buying another board just to lay out flats, even though you do need quite a bit of space. So I'll just show you both options. So again, I'm going in to just transfer my second figure. And I do want to make sure she's lined up so she's not tilted. Because on my sketch, she was a little tilted. So it doesn't look like she's about to fall over. And just remember, you only need flats for the marker collection. You don't need them for the watercolor collection. But if you want to include the flats for the watercolor collection, that's absolutely fine. So there's my second figure, and I'll do one more. Camera's just a little out of focus. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm gonna be using the Caran d'Ache crayons, just to kind of get through this quickly. And again, because I'm using the wet media board, I can just go straight to the board. You can also mix this with the watercolor pencils, because it's a little hard to get, fine spaces with the Caran d'Ache. And if you didn't plan out your colors while you were sketching in your design notes, then you need to make sure that you have thought about that before you start coloring in your figures, because this is kind of a one-shot deal. With the marker, it doesn't have to be. With the watercolor, if you don't like something, you kind of have to start it over again. So again, we always start with all of our skin color, and I'm remembering to use some of the white of the page for highlights. I'm not coloring it in completely. And thinking about my mood board, I'm gonna go in with, I guess, the green color, maybe for my pant. And I'm just gonna do a little shading. If you are using watercolor, just remember about your mixing. Remember, you're gonna paint pretty much in the direction that the grain of the garment. Okay, and then for the hair, again, you want it darkest where it's closest to the head, or it would be thickest I'm just kind of creating a shape. So pretty much the root and the tip of the hair would be the darkest here. So I'm just kind of lightly suggesting it. And I think I might go ahead and make this jacket kind of color blocked. Maybe here, do some yellow. Color starting to mix. I don't know if that's cute. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just keep it all yellow. And we'll do kind of like a Sprite outfit. I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna just lightly color this in. Okay, so now I'm ready to go in with my water. I'm not sure what I want to do for the shirt on the inside. In that mint green color, so I could either go in with watercolor pencil, or I could mix one of my watercolors from the tube. Okay, so I'm gonna go in and remember, you never want too much water on your brush. I'm gonna start with my lighter color so they don't mix. And I'm just gonna kind of move my color around on the page, try to blend it. Now, I probably should have, especially where I can see this yellow, I can see my pencil line in there. The camera's trying to focus. You can see my pencil line here. So I'm gonna have to kind of go over that. With pencil to kind of define your line, because with the wet medium it gets pretty muddy. But I probably should have went over that with the kneaded eraser first, before I did my wash. Okay, just want to make sure I clean my brush. If I move on to the next color, I think I'm going to use a flat brush for this kind of bigger area here. And just kind of use the color to move up and down the page. Again, you always want to highlight unless your goal is flat color. So, leave some white on the page. It doesn't have to have full coverage. Just make sure you're painting in the same direction. And your details do get a little lost when you're working with the wet medium. So don't get too hung up on, oh, now I can't see my fly front, now I can't see my pockets, because you can always go back over it with color pencil as an accent. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in with my hair. I think I'm gonna use a smaller round brush. This is the number 8 brush. That one was the number 8 flat brush. And again, I want it darkest at the root and the tip. I want to get a really nice black here. And I'm able to get some nice fine strokes. Then I can just kind of start blending it. And just using the water to just kind of blend it and give it a little highlight. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in and just touch up my skin color here. And it's getting lost a little bit. And I don't want it to pick up the black from the hair. So I just made her shirtless without planning that. But once it's dry, I can go back over it and just make it a little darker because I didn't give her a shirt color. So this next one's gonna have a print, and I'm gonna go in and just kind of plan out the print. This was the print for my swatch. Okay, so I know that all of my circles for this are green. Just go ahead and start coloring those in. And again, you don't have to do full coverage, even if you're just going with the watercolor. I think I'm going to go in with the watercolor and gouache on this just to remind you on how to do the mixes. So we'll kind of do a combination of both. And let's add some yellow in the background. And some orange. does have some white in there. So I'm gonna just go back in and kind of define the white areas. And then, I guess this is a dress, so this should all be printed, I guess. I'll have something kind of like that. And this has a little cape on it. Okay, so I'm actually gonna go in and ink this after I do, let's try a different skin color here. I'm gonna go in with, let's try some highlights. I'm gonna go in with the skin color underneath. Let's see if this works. And I can go in and fill in her actual skin color. Okay. Didn't leave much room for highlight here, but figure it out. Okay, her arms got a little thick. And I'm gonna go in with the darker brown and darken again that root and the tip of her hair. And let's see if those mix well. But just keep in mind that your customer should kind of look like the same person. So I shouldn't have two different hair colors in here. I just want to show you how you can kind of get like a highlighted or a different look. Let's see. So I do need to color in the rest of her face. And I think I'm gonna color in her lip with watercolor, so I'll leave it. So let's go in and I really use the big brush. Let's try the big brush, see if we can get kind of like a dramatic effect here. Something kind of dramatic. So the big brush, this is the 3/4 flat brush. I'm just gonna kind of dab it and see what the water does. Because I want it to kind of look like a stamped look, kind of like the fabric looked. Because it was a wax print. So they can kind of bleed into each other. So I don't necessarily want this to be in the lines. Okay, that's a little too small for me to do this. I'm gonna go in and do the orange and then go in and attack the other colors with a smaller brush. Okay, and all of these shapes should have like a black outline, which is why I'm not worried about the white space right now. And then remember I did have some white in the middle. So I'm gonna go over those areas here. Okay, and this probably had too much water, so this is starting to kind of blend together. Okay, later I can, what I like about watercolor is you can always just kind of rework it and keep going back over it. Okay, so I'm gonna use my round brush, see if I can go in and do my skin color here. And I'm gonna need to give her a lip color later. And her arm got a little thick. It should not look like that, but we're just gonna leave it like that. Okay, I'm making it worse. I'm just gonna kind of stylize that arm. It's just disappearing into nothing. Okay, I'm gonna try the flat brush on her hair. Let's see if that makes a difference. The blending, maybe. Yeah, if I want a little bit more of the brown to show up, I can always go back over it with the brown, or I can go back over it with color pencil after everything dries. Okay, so I did go and get the $5 set of 48 color pencils from Five Below. Never used it. We're opening it now. They're all pre-sharpened. Nice. We can kind of go in and kind of define some of these things. I don't like the way that lip looks really muddy. So I can go over that because this first figure is dry. You can see that that second one is still kind of dry because I used my water. So I'm gonna go in and just kind of define her lip here a little bit. And if I go in with a darker green, all of these to come out. I can go over the details on the pants here. But you never want to go in with color pencil just by itself. So I can kind of sharpen this up a little bit. I can do some blending. I can define my little fly front here. I want to put some stitching on there. I can kind of clean up. So where I'm kind of losing my line quality here, I can go in and just kind of redefine the edge of the page. I can make my pin tuck down the front a little bit sharper. Make sure I'm not smudging my other girl there. I think I got her a little bit. I want to put some little top stitching on here because, you know, I want to pay attention to detail. I can do that. So color pencil used as an accent. So let's see, I can go in with the black. So if you want to go in really light at first with your hair, then you can kind of build up value with the black. It'll only go so dark. If you need to go darker, you'll have to use like, you know, indigo blue on top of black works. If you need to build up a lot of value. And I can kind of go in and just blend this a little bit more. And just kind of define it around her face. Soften it up a little bit. And on the same token, with this jacket, I can also, sometimes I like to go in and define things. I wouldn't necessarily want to go in with a yellow over this, but I can go in with my pencil and just kind of define. Just depends on the style that you want. My seams here, my pocket. Because me going over this with the yellow would not be very effective. And just so it stands out a little bit more. And it's completely up to you how you want to deal with that. I could probably do that on the lip so the lip looks a little bit more defined. Let's see. So probably went too strong in with the red. Let's try to give her sort of like a coral lip. And just now they're just looking like hearts. I don't know what's going on. And I did not color her little shawl thing here because I was going to go in with the gouache. So that's going over it with color pencil as an accent. Maybe one of these pant legs kind of looks bigger than the other. So I could go in with the watercolor and just kind of fix that. So I'm going to go in here, and this print, these shapes are all outlined with black. So I'm going to do that in watercolor. I could probably also do that in ink, but I'm gonna do that in the watercolor. Or I'm sorry, this is the gouache. So I'm gonna mix this green and a little bit of blue to make sort of like a teal color. And let's see how this works out. And again, make sure you flatten your brush so you get a nice good mix. Probably a little too blue. Actually, I like this one better. There we go. You don't want too much on your brush. So I'm gonna go back in over this. I have a little bit too much of a wash here. Okay, gouache is a little bit heavier so than the watercolor. But I want these turquoise shapes to be kind of strong, so. And go in and kind of just blend with the water, move the color around on the page to make it even. And I had a little spill there, so I'm gonna just make that shape bigger. Okay, and then I'm gonna just let that dry. It doesn't look as vibrant on the camera as it does in real life, so. So I'm gonna try to get that same effect of the kind of batik here. So I want to see if I outline my shapes like on my printed fabric with the ink, how that'll look. So we'll see. I think this might still be wet, so it's not picking up the ink so much. I don't really know how I feel about it, but we're gonna commit to it. I'm gonna add a little bit of texture to it. And I could go in and try to kind of sort of define the outline of my dress. I think I just overdid it with the print. I think I'll do that with the pencil. And I did not color the shawl thing. So maybe we can do that in the black. And I'm gonna just use the ink. Oh, I don't like that. Okay, so there's my little shawl. And I did not put a color at the bottom of this. So maybe let's go on with the black at the bottom. I want it to be nice and dark, so I'm gonna just use a lot of water and kind of carry it over the page. Okay, I think it's too much black, but okay, so there's my two watercolor, and this is straight on the wet medium artboard. And for this demonstration, I just did the two figures, but you'll have more figures. So you can see that it's important to keep a nice clean workspace. I can see that I have some smudges here. So I'm gonna go in with my kneaded eraser and try to get rid of these smudges. I have some in between my figures, and I'm gonna erase my guideline here. And if I had my whole lineup of figures here, this would be done. So never ever put your name or any handwritten text unless that's part of your collection on the front. Just make sure you neatly put your name on the back of your board in black ink, or you can paint it. So at the bottom of my board, I'm gonna just go in and put my initials here. Okay, so for the marker collection, I'm literally gonna go from copy paper. And remember, we never ink our originals. So I'm gonna take my tracing paper and actually go put it on the copier and copy my figures. And I'm gonna just do the same figures for the marker rendering. And I'll also show you how to approach the flats. Okay, so when looking for flats in Folio, I have a module called Drawing Flats, and there's some templates for flats here, and then suggestions for layouts here. And you can see right underneath that, there's the video for the artboards and Hobby Lobby. So these are just some examples of how you can have your figures, and then these are flats with design notes. Same thing here, some evenware flats, and you can see how, because you have to spread them out, they take up the page. So this is what I meant by you can overlap your flats. They kind of have to be in a step down or step up, but you want to organize them in the way that we wear our clothes. So, top should be at the top, bottoms and should be at the bottoms. Coat and jacket should be at the top of the page. But these are just your detailed technical drawings of your outfits. These are not spec drawings. Spec drawings have to be drawn to scale. And usually those are done on the computer. These are just fashion flats. So they just show the construction of your garment. Okay. Do make sure that your flats are in proportion to each other. So they all should look like they fit on the same body, which is why we use a croquis. So here's another example of some really detailed, you can see the really detailed top stitching and the shading, some really detailed flats. So I'm gonna go back and show you where the templates are for drawing the flats. You wanna have a similar body type to your customer. So this is sort of like a little bit more modern, like high-waisted, curvier figure. And then there's one for males in here. And what you want is to be able to see the center of the body. You wouldn't want to use this one for flats. You want your straight up and down figure because your flat should be symmetrical. So if he's posed, those flats are not going to be symmetrical. And then here's another one for the female flat. And just showing a body map. This one's easy to draw on because it'll show the neckline, where the sleeve seam should be, elbow, waistline, and your whole torso. Okay. And it even has a side view if you need to draw a side view flat, which is only necessary if you need to show a detail there. So I'm gonna use this croquis you can print out to trace over to draw flats. And I'm going to show you how to do that also using tracing paper to put down on your page with your figures.